All right, good morning. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Waking up to a few fireworks in the market this morning. Not a ton, but a little bit. We have S&P futures down about 17 points here early on this morning, with bonds moving on higher. And, we have the same kind of movement in the U.S. dollar. We have this kind of just continued escalation in the U.S. dollar that is just smacking emerging markets to a pretty substantial degree. And we have the whole Turkey situation, which is also a currency situation. And, with the U.S. versus Turkey and the spat and the tit-for-tat sanctions and the stories are out there. You can read up all. I'm not going to, recap everything that's going on there, but it's one of those things that continues to be in the escalation phase. And we saw a little relief rally yesterday, and we talked about some of the stuff that was kind of coming in that was interesting, but mostly yesterday wasn't a big change. It wasn't the type of day where we can look and say, oh, okay, boom, off we go. But a little bit of a little relief rally, and then today set the gap lower. Now, take a look at futures last night, and I have the chart of S&P futures, and I'm shrinking futures down. The drop here is between about 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, or 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning Mountain Time, so 4 to 8 Eastern. But take a look down here at the volumes on S&P futures on this move. Why do I show them to you? Because they were higher than what we saw for much of the day yesterday. Very unusual. We don't see that very often at all. But, it's a reality of what it looks like right now. And generally, that's either a sign that this is a really nice bottoming area or down, down, down we go. And, I think it's an area that has to be respected for its ability to sell off from these levels to a significant degree. But I also don't think it's a level where, I just stare at it and say, oh, okay, this morning I'm going to go sell everything and let's go sell, sell, sell. It's one of those where I do want to see if the week's lows will get taken out. And we talked about those yesterday. And you can see this week's lows down here around 28.20 on S&P futures. And you can see they're not taken out this morning. We're right down at that level, right? So we're not talking about a move and breaking the lows that would be the type of gap where you say, hey, you know what, just sell because this thing is about to roll over. Not only do we not see that breaking the lows so far, but if you look at something like small caps, IWM, nowhere even close, right? If you look at something like the Qs, they're down here near the lows. You look at something like the Dow, it's gapping into new lows. So, we have a heavy mix in the indexes. You look at emerging markets, they're gapping to new lows. You look at China, it's gapping to new lows. So, it's a very mixed bag for a lot of these indexes. But, the S&P seems to be kind of the stable picture, the middle of the road picture, where we have U.S. small caps, the outperformer due to the currency rise of the U.S. dollar, and emerging markets dropping because of the U.S. dollar. And, that's what the markets are being faced with, right here. Now, in terms of some of the news and things like that are going on, there's not a heck of a whole lot. We saw a downgrade on Micron, or a price target drop on Micron overnight. Micron's one of those stocks on my list here for the challenge where I think it's priced pretty perfectly. It's not the type of stock that I go, oh man, this should be a $70 stock. I know a lot of some analysts actually have triple-digit price targets on it. But you look at it fundamentally, it's priced about right here. And so to see it dip a bit or to see it rally a bit over the course of this quarter, I think is very, feasible. And it'll come down to some of the momentum. And talked about wanting to be able to pick some up if it breaks the 200-day moving average and we see some bottoming signs come in. So today with the downgrade, there's a chance we might be able to see that. I'll be looking for a heavy volume day. And if we get a heavy volume day, might be able to pick some up a little bit later in the day for some sort of snapback type rally there. And then Chipotle, which I talked about yesterday, and it was my favorite trade on the board. I said, when I got on video, it was up about $10. I said, I want to see it move down a few bucks into the close, down somewhere around 492, 490, somewhere in that area. It didn't. And this is one of the dangers of being too picky. This morning it gets upgraded by Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley slaps a $600 price target on it. And essentially Chipotle this morning is set to gap up to, the price that we talked about it getting to yesterday in that 505 area. Now, I do think 510 is very realistic for it, but it's going to buck the market at least early this morning based on that upgrade there from Morgan Stanley. There's not a lot in terms of, what we see from the analyst, and, the analysts have been fairly quiet here overall as we're kind of in the middle of August. But I do expect that over the coming weeks, we'll start to see them increase a little bit in terms of, their chatter, in terms of, what they're expecting in the second half of this year for a lot of names and a lot of stocks out there in the market. Now, in this backdrop of the Turkish, U.S.-Turkish situation, it's kind of overshadowing U.S. versus China right now, we have economic data that's been coming in this week. And it's one where none of the data pieces do I look at and say, wow, these are big pieces of data that are going to matter in a huge way. So I kind of look at them and go, okay, on aggregate, what are we seeing? Well, we had the U.S. Empire State Manufacturing Survey this morning, which came in at a new high for the year. It's one of those things where conditions actually improved and new orders rose, so really strong number here out of the Empire State Manufacturing Survey. Very bullish type number here for it. No sign of pullback. In fact, sign of continued acceleration. Now, retail sales data, the last month element was revised down, and then this month's element beat expectations pretty sizably. For a pretty big mark, even with some of the cool down that we're seeing in auto sales, right? So auto sales are kind of cooling off, but overall retail sales, and in fact, if you look at the yearly number here, year-over-year change, you see it continuing to climb. And we continue to see the year-over-year change in retail sales grow, and another positive piece of data. And so, we went through this kind of 2 to 3 month period where some of the data started to flatten out, where we weren't seeing it accelerate, right? This Ferrari that had moved up to 10, 15 miles an hour from that kind of 2 to 5 miles an hour, right? Moved up into this 10, 15 mile an hour, kind of back down to around, 7, 8 miles an hour. But we're seeing some of the, at least in the U.S. data, we're seeing signs that it's kicking up in the 10, 15 mile per hour area again. Now, I say 10 to 15 mile an hour on a Ferrari. Why? Because it's nowhere near, what it could be, but, it is significantly stronger than what it has been. Now, in the face of that, we do have emerging market economies that are really struggling. And in fact, one of the economic indicators that many have used for many years, including myself, is copper, the price of copper, right? If you don't want to deal with reading the economic data and looking at the economic data and try to figure out what the economic data is doing and what it looks like, just look at the price of copper, because generally you're going to get a decent look at how the economic data is doing. And overall, it's been decent, not perfect, right? But this copper chart, and this is a 2014 to today, a weekly chart. This copper chart It's had some highs and lows, and we see copper having a major pullback here. Well, this copper chart doesn't necessarily follow U.S. economic data. It follows the emerging markets, or some would argue, leads the emerging markets. And you can see this pullback in emerging markets, correlating here to copper. Again, I'm saying correlating, not causing, but correlating here to copper. And, with the U.S. dollar on the rise the way that it is, we have copper pulling back substantially. And, this kind of goes with some of the weaker data points we've seen in China, some of the weaker data points we've seen out of other emerging market nations. And, if you're looking for when are emerging markets going to bottom, when we're going to see, this kind of, value actually kick in, take a look at copper. When we start to see some material improvement in the price of copper, we will see emerging markets turn around. You can also follow that in a specific stock, FCX, that trades with copper, or BHP, that tends to trade with copper, though a lot more iron ore exposure. But here FCX been in a sizable downturn here with the stock. But when you start to see the stock turn around, that's probably a pretty good sign that some calm is coming back into emerging markets. But so far, that's not the case. So far it's more panic, it's more fear than calm. But if you're looking for signs that maybe calm will come in, copper is the place to look. Copper's the place to kind of say, okay, here it's starting to turn around a little bit. We don't have a lot of earnings right now. We've had a few trickle in, some in the retail space, but the earnings season is pretty much over outside of a few kind of names. We had Macy's last night, and you can see they're set to gap down pretty good here. I haven't gone through the report. It's not a company or stock that I'm too interested in, but we will have Walmart earnings upcoming here. In fact, I believe they are tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that yes, tomorrow morning here, Walmart earnings. We will also have Alibaba that it will be reporting earnings. This is a stock that's been in a serious downturn here. They report on the 23rd, so a week from tomorrow. And, this is a stock that, long term, I'm very bullish on. I'm extremely bullish on Baba long term. And I have a position, but it's one that I am looking to add to. This has been something where, and we've talked about it all year, where on the rips I've kind of been, trimming it, and on the dips I've been adding to it. And I'm in a position to really want to add. I looked at selling some puts on it yesterday. Decided to wait. I'll be looking at that here today as we get down into what has been the support level for Alibaba over the course of the last year. But very interesting area for it. Obviously, dropping with the emerging market concerns, with the China concerns. And in fact, we'll see FXI drop pretty good here this morning, as we showed earlier. So it's caught in this storm through kind of no fault of its own, and one that look, if you're looking out 2 years or something longer than that, Alibaba around these levels becomes incredibly compelling. If you're looking really short term, what I'm looking for is some big volume. We had some good volume yesterday. In fact, in the morning yesterday, it was strong enough to suggest the bottom was in for the day, but that was it. It was, just for the day. I'm looking for a sign the volume's good enough to say, hey, bottom is in for a while, to want to be a buyer in terms of short-term options or for something like the challenge. But again, a lot of support levels for the market are going to get hit this morning early on. And, to me, this first hour is going to be really interesting of how things shape up and how things set up. So I'll be looking for small pullbacks in things like a Capital One that we talked about yesterday, American Express, Discover. Do they give me an opportunity to be a buyer? I'll also be looking at the outperformers early on this morning. on a day where we get a sizable gap down, especially if the market closes near lows, some of the stocks that outperform on that type of day tend to do much better going forward. So we'll be looking for those and seeing which one of those are out there and which one of those are going on. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a great one. At 12 o'clock Eastern time, I'll be on video. We'll do the first training session with our technical analysis series here in August. That'll probably drift into a little bit into September, but looking forward to getting that kicked off. The video recording will be in the video library. If you have any questions, let us know. Have yourselves a great one. We'll talk to you later. Take care.